Welcome to Decarbonize talks to people who know more than he does. Today, I'm speaking with an old friend, Brian Grunkemeyer, who is the CEO and founder of FlexCharging. Brian, welcome to Decarbonize. Can you tell us a bit about the problem FlexCharging is solving?
Absolutely, Andy. Flex charging integrates EV charging with the power grid. Right now, utilities are not ready for all of the load that's coming on from EVs. With the current plans, they need to build more power plants. But it's really expensive to do that, and it takes a long time to get them permitted. Also, there's just not enough money to do this cheaply. It's not just the power plants, it's also the distribution grid that also causes problems. You have a neighborhood with a lot of EVs in it, then if everyone starts charging their car at the exact same time, you can overload a transformer and shorten its life. Utilities buy these transformers expecting them to last for 40 years. But if you have, say, 10 EVs charging in your neighborhood at the exact same time, maybe the lifetime of that transformer is more like 5 years, or maybe even less. There's a big need for utilities to integrate EV charging in a beneficial way to lower costs and to reduce carbon emissions.
Well, that's great. So, what is FlexCharging's secret sauce? How do you approach this problem?
We use EV telematics. Essentially, if you have a Tesla or any of the EVs now, there's an app on your phone. That app talks to your car. We use the exact same mechanism to do that. So in the same way that, OnStar has been around for GM for a long time, we use that same mechanism. Every car is a connected car these days. So we have a website where people can sign up and give us permission to access their car. Then we use the same mechanism that the automakers do to chat with your car. This uses a combination of the cloud and the cell phone network. We also integrate with utilities to understand their needs and how we can best integrate EV charging in their service territory. Then we collect data and provide detailed analytics to utilities, explaining where and when people charge so that they know where to build out new charging stations and where they need to go and upgrade their distribution grid.
What's going to be different for me when I drive into my garage and I plug in my EV? How are things going to be different? What's my experience going to be different if I'm
Yes.
working with flex charging?
So after you sign up, you drive home and you plug in your car. It'll start charging, but then very quickly we notice that your car is charging. And then we stop charging for your car if it's at the wrong time of day. For almost every utility, if you are charging your car between, say, 5 and 8 p.m., that's the worst time of day for that utility. And so we stop charging and then we restart it later, usually in the middle of the night. In some locations, we try to shift charging towards the next day, if at all possible. So
So, what if I come home and my car's nearly empty? I've had a busy day driving. Will it still just postpone charging?
that's an excellent example. We know that people buy a car to drive first and use this for emergency purposes, then their daily commuting, and all of the rest of the things you do in your life. And then uh, no one actually buys a car to provide this as a grid asset, um, or to help your utility save money or to reduce the carbon emissions used for the power grid. And so we realize we must absolutely prioritize the emergency needs of the driver first.
How much charge would I get before it stops charging?
We make sure that you can do a round trip to your nearest hospital and back.
Okay. And in the morning, will my car be fully charged?
Yes, we strive as hard as possible to charge your car up to full.
You mentioned carbon reductions. That's not what people do it for. But does this accomplish carbon reduction?
Absolutely. The load on the power grid is not constant over time. There's a set of power plants that are nearly constantly running most of the time. Solar comes on during the day Right around noon. There are natural gas plants that are used to fill in most of those gaps when renewables are not available. And we can help make sure that you can optimize charging to take advantage of those renewable sources whenever possible.
So can you tell us what we're seeing here? Because I think this really shows what you're capable of.
Yes, we worked with a utility in Australia to optimize EV charging around their needs. The utility has a morning peak and an evening peak in their system load. And that is when they need to use essentially the dirtiest power possible. Um, and also, the prices are higher for them too. The prices are very high in Australia generally. And so, as a result, 30% of Australians have solar. For EV drivers, it's even higher. 70% of EV drivers in Australia that we've studied have solar. And so, if there's anything that we can do to soak up the sun and allow drivers to drive on sunlight, that saves money for drivers that have solar, and it saves money for the electric utilities as well. Of course, driving on sunlight is the best way to drive your EV. No one bought an EV to drive their car off of coal.
So in this example, I could see how in the morning and evening peaks you would want to ideally charge go to zero. It doesn't
Mhm.
quite go to zero because probably those people who've just plugged in a car that's hungry. In the shoulder between the morning peak and the increased solar area, can you set it up where they're charging at say half speed?
Not all the automakers allow us to lower the speed. However, that's certainly something that we've been looking at. And we know that it's helpful, but if you have enough EVs signed up, then you can get that same thing in aggregate by turning off an entire car or turning one on.
Oh, yeah, sure. So you do it not by charging all the cards at half speed, you charge half the cards at full speed.
Yes, yes,
Probably the hungriest ones.
yes, exactly.
Okay,
A-
yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. Do you work
And
with all the car manufacturers?
we support 31 auto manufacturers right now. Uh, Not all of them are on board, but most of them are. And we're increasing that set all the time. We add about one auto manufacturer every quarter.
Do you work with any of the Chinese companies?
No, not yet. We'd love to work with, say, BYD, for example,
Right.
and MG, which is actually big in Australia. However, currently we don't. Um, Although there may be some interesting relationships that we get through some of the European auto manufacturers as well.
If the utility, let's say during the day, they typically use solar, and in the evenings, they typically use wind because wind peaks at night and solar peaks during the day. But there's a high pressure zone. So they're getting a lot of solar during the day, but they're not getting a lot of wind at night, or maybe the wind isn't coming up till later than it usually does. Is this a tool the utility can use to manage unusual events?
Absolutely. We do have support for something called demand response events. So if a utility knows that there's going to be a specific problem, they can tell us and we will shift charging out of that window. We also integrate with a company called WattTime that provides a carbon emissions forecast, and we optimize around that carbon emissions forecast. These are specific to basically each utility. And we make sure that we can lower carbon emissions while still making sure your car is fully charged when you need it.
So on a average day, the time that my car would be charging might vary depending
Yes.
on that watt load. So you might not even need a demand response event because the carbon load would also go up if the wind's not blowing.
Yes, yes. My attitude is we should do the right thing every day by default in terms of shifting when cars charge. Demand response certainly helps. It's one tool in the toolbox. However, if you only view it through the lens of doing demand response events, you're missing out on a lot of opportunities to lower carbon and lower costs every day.
I like the do the right thing every day. I think that's you should have that on your business cards. So other than doing the right thing every day, what are the incentives? I see the incentive for the utility that it lowers their cost of production by being able to shift time, and it lowers wear and tear on the distribution grid
Mhm.
by getting demand outside of the peaks
Mhm.
so that those transformers aren't being hit as hard. For many people, myself included, doing the right thing and lowering my carbon load, that's a sufficient incentive for me. But
Mhm.
are there other incentives for the car owner?
Yes. So we work with utilities to set up programs to encourage people to charge at off-peak times. So we're working with utilities across the US, in Australia, and in Ireland to help optimize charging to lower costs. And many of these programs come with incentives for signing up and then participating and not opting out too often. So if you essentially allow us to manage charging 85% of the time for, say, 3 months, we may pay you an incentive then for continuing to participate in the program.
Drive home, my car's low, and I know I'm going on a big trip, leaving at midnight. Is
Yes.
there there's a mechanism where I can override?
Yes, you can opt out of managed charging for, say, a day.
Okay.
And that would allow you to fully charge up for that road trip and make sure that we are allowing you to enjoy your EV as an EV first.
What are the biggest barriers to acceptance of this concept? Because it to me, it makes a lot of sense. There's nothing installed in the garage.
Mhm.
It's low effort. You set it up to do the right thing every day. And if you have an unusual day where you need the car to be charged, you have a way to make an exception. So it seems to make a
Mhm.
lot of sense to me. So what are your barriers to greater acceptance?
The biggest problem is simply awareness. Most people do not think about the fact that electricity costs different amounts throughout the day. And in some regions, like the Pacific Northwest, people have flat rates. But the utility actually does pay a very different amount based on when they use that power. Many people in this country are not aware of all the challenges here that the utility goes through, both in terms of procuring power and also managing the distribution grid. So
Mm.
that's why utility programs are very helpful for educating people. Here in the US, only about a third of people are signed up with time of use rates. So there's a big knowledge gap out there. Then some people ask, well, can I just program my car to start charging at, say, 11 p.m.? You could. However, if everyone does that, then every car starts turning on at exactly 11 p.m., all within, a few seconds because they're all using atomic clocks that are
Mm.
synchronized on the back end.
Right.
So you end up creating a bigger problem for utilities by providing a general rule to drivers saying, oh, this is the off-peak charging time, start charging right then. And that causes huge problems for utility. My first conversation with utility came down to, oh, yeah, we have enough power, we have enough energy, but we don't have a ramp rate. I'm like, oh, it's really hard for you to turn on power plants very, very quickly.
Right. So you can turn load on very, very slowly.
Yes, yes, exactly. And so, for this reason, and also to enable optimizing around carbon emissions that change every day,
Mhm.
then we need people to participate in a centralized program that has full visibility into what's happening with the distribution grid and prices from the utility and carbon emissions. So that's what we've built to go help make sure that we can keep the lights on affordably and get the most value out of our renewable energy.
So if one of my many viewers wanted to participate with flex charging, is that possible?
Yes, we run programs with many individual utilities, and we're putting together a nationwide website where you can sign up, tell us what your utility is. If there's a utility program, great, we will connect you with that program. If not, We know what the carbon emissions are, and we can do the right thing on your behalf and help you save money on time of use rates.
So we'll put a link to that website in the description, and I encourage people to try it out. If you, I guess, if you had a work schedule where you were a nurse and your shift started at 2 a.m., this probably would make sense for you.
We are working on some UI improvements to allow people to say, I need my car fully charged by 1 a.m. So that nurse's scenario is fully covered. So,
Okay.
yes,
So there's very little downside to trying this. So I encourage people to follow the link that'll be in the description. And if you do that, please put in the comments how it worked for you. What was your experience? And I'll make sure Brian sees them all.
thank you. Yes, we would love the feedback from your extremely motivated and knowledgeable audience.
Well, Brian, thanks so much for your time and sharing your expertise with us. This has been great. And I hope everyone's learned a lot. And please share this video with anyone you know who has an electric car and might be interested in trying this out. I know a few people that will definitely get the link.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay, thanks, Brian.